A murder mystery at Burning Man. We now know the name of the man who was found in a pool of blood at the arts festival that draws tens of thousands of people to a temporary city that rises in a remote part of Nevada every year. What we know about the victim and the search for answers in a shocking case of violence in the desert. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. If you have never heard of Burning Man, when you see pictures of it, it's a lot to take in. But what you need to understand in this story is that this arts festival that's known the world over became the scene of a murder this year. All of this happened on Saturday night of last week. This is 37-year-old Vadim Kruglov. He's originally from Russia, but he was living in the US in Washington State. He was an artist. He helped build an art installation at Burning Man this year, according to his friends. And this is video of what appears to be Vadim drawing out the campsite and art installation for the festival. One of his friends referred to him as a true hero of Burning Man who was always ready to help others. But police say that Vadim was murdered on the night of August 30th. The local sheriff said he was found in a, quote, pool of blood, and it took days to identify him. A friend shared this video of Vadim partying at Burning Man this year in the days before his death. Now, before I get to the evidence that we know about in the search for Vadim's killer, I want to set the stage for you of what Burning Man looks like and what happens there every year, because it's a very unique place, certainly a very unique and potentially challenging crime scene for law enforcement. This festival takes place in Black Rock City, Nevada every year. It's in the northwest part of Nevada, very remote location, more than 2 hours north of Reno. And when you zoom in on Google Maps, you can actually see this half moon shape. That's the temporary camp city that roughly 80,000 people build every year around Labor Day for Burning Man. The festival lasts 9 days leading up to Labor Day, and people get together, they wear wild costumes, there's live music, people party, they celebrate art and culture. You might actually remember back in 2023, speaking of the scene that Burning Man creates, there was a storm that came through. It created a wild scene where tens of thousands of people were trapped in mud, and that cut Burning Man short. But this year, the event dealt with a much different issue, and that is the murder now of Vadim Kruglov. The climax of Burning Man every year is the burning of an art installation that is called The Man. It's set on fire. This is a picture of it from a previous event. The Pershing County, Nevada Sheriff's Office said on Saturday, August 30th, it was around 9:14 that night, right as the art installation was set on fire, deputies were waved over by festival goers who say they found Kruglov in a pool of blood on the ground. Now, at the time of this recording, we don't know how Kruglov died, but police say when they came across his body, he was, quote, obviously deceased. Now, deputies say they interviewed people in the immediate area and they gathered evidence as well as blocking off part of the camp city where the body was found. It wasn't until Wednesday night this week that law enforcement announced that Kruglov was the victim in this murder. The medical examiner said they had to identify him using fingerprints. Now, before he was identified, his friends posted pictures of him saying that they had lost sight of him, that he was missing, and they needed help finding him. That friend said he was at places at Burning Man, one called the Mayan Warrior, which this is a picture from his Facebook page. It's a moving music stage. It's a staple of the festival. She also said that he danced inside something called the Pyramid. So it does seem that Kruglov was in multiple locations the night of his death and in the hours leading up to his murder. Now, we do know that Kruglov was originally from Russia, but he was living in Washington State. We also found that he had a previous address in New York City. So it appears he was in the United States for some time. Deputies say that his family has been notified of his murder. There's a GoFundMe right now raising money to send his remains back to his hometown in Russia. Now, Burning Man Festival organizers released a statement and it said that they are cooperating with the investigation, but an interesting part of this investigation is that there's not a lot of images of the crime scene as there's barely any cell phone service in the desert where Burning Man is located. But organizers did say there are Wi-Fi spots that people can use. It will be interesting as this investigation goes on, what images and video becomes available as people leave Burning Man and then get cell phone service back. Joining us now is retired FBI agent and attorney Bobby Chacon. Thank you as always for being with us on Law and Crime. I think of this crime scene and it's this makeshift tent city. It was at night, you're in the desert, there's not a lot of cell phone service. I mean, how do you go about investigating this case in this type of environment?
Yeah, it's really difficult because you have so many people involved, so many people who could be witnesses, and then they all disperse after this, the concert or the event is ended. So on one hand, it looks like, wow, we may have a lot of witnesses because so many people attended this. On the other hand, these are very transient people. They're gone in a day or two. You don't know where they were. Tickets for these things can be somewhat anonymous. And so you don't know who actually witnessed it. So really, you kind of have to put out a call to the public for assistance. You have to kind of get on their social media, their platforms, wherever the demographic of the people that attended this event go to share information, things like that. So you have to kind of get savvy on who your audience is, and then kind of appeal to them that way. The good thing is that a lot of these people have video maybe they were taking with their cell phones. Even if you're out of range for your cell phone, you can still use it as a camera, right, and record pictures and video. So there may be some valuable pictures and video. We kind of already know from reporting that it seems like there is, because they have kind of identified the victim in certain places during the Burning Man event. He was here, he was there. So I would assume the only way they know that is through either an actual witness or they've seen video that put him in those places. They need more of that. They need more video to see who he was dancing with, who he was associating with, who he was drinking with, those kind of things. And while there may be an abundance of that out there, it's actually finding the people who have it, getting them to respond to you. That's the challenge.
Before I get back to this episode of On the Case, which is one of the most watched shows on all of YouTube, I need to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. That is America's largest injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys and a history of winning, and they win a lot. They've recovered more than $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In just the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. And another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. Now, even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to start a claim. You can do it with just 8 clicks on your phone. So if you've been hurt and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. In some ways, there's not a lot of cell phone service. I think there's a few like Wi-Fi spots, but then on the other end, like the entire event seems to be for like the Instagram influencer crowd. So it's like people are taking videos, they just haven't come out yet, which is kind of an interesting part of this. Not to get morbid, but that's kind of with where this story began. And it was described that this victim was in a pool of blood, and the perception of what it may be, but knowing that that is how it was described of what his body was found like, what does that tell you about the potential timeline of when this murder happened?
Well, I've read that reporting, and I don't know where he was found in the pool of blood. So, pool of blood often means, a traumatic injury, a blunt object beating or something like that. Or it could be, a gunshot wound. But you would think that an event like this is so crowded in such a small area, that people are packed in there, that, something like a gunshot or even a bludgeoning with a blunt instrument would draw attention of people around them, and so you'd have, many more people reporting this and going to the authorities and things like that. So it really does, beg the question of, and we don't have the autopsy report, the means and manner of death. Was it a knife? A knife could be used more silently to create a wound that would create a pool of blood, but still people would see this person in distress. Now, if he was found in an area, behind a row of porta potties or, somewhere where people weren't congregating, that would mean something else to me. So it all depends on the location, exact location in that crowd at that event where he was found.
Yeah, because it seems just from what I've seen, his friends were talking about all the places he was that night. That, again, it's this giant tent city of 80,000 people. And detectives said they interviewed people that night. It's like, who did they talk to? How does he just disappear in this giant crowd? I've never been to Burning Man personally, so I don't know if there's spots where you can just kind of disappear and where something like this could potentially happen. I know that they had to identify him with his fingernails, and this is another morbid question, but what does that tell you about what potentially happened in this crime?
Well, that tells me there was enough significant damage to his face. A facial identification is usually the way that we go. You try to find people, friends, family members that can identify someone by their face. If you have to resort to something else, it means there was so much damage to the face that a person couldn't identify them either in person, or you take a picture of it and you send it to the person and say, is this the person? Sometimes those can be brutal observations when you bring people in and they have to look at their loved one like that. But it tells me that there was so much damage to his face. Usually, if the face is not there, then we go to tattoos, maybe prominent scars on the person. Did they have a tattoo of, Jesus Christ on their right forearm? Things like that are very specific, and family members can say yes. That doesn't necessarily identify the person specifically, but it certainly narrows it down to, you can start ruling people in or out. And then, of course, DNA, fingerprints, and dental records are things that we use in furtherance of that when we can't get, that facial recognition identification.
I know, and from what we've been told by law enforcement, that when they discovered his body, they roped off the area where his body was found. They tried to collect as much evidence as they could. Unique part of this is that Burning Man's now over. So this vast area of the desert where all these people were, it's all gone. It's disappeared. How much of an issue is that for law enforcement? Do you really still need the crime scene? If this happened Saturday night, now that it's seemingly gone, is that an issue?
It can be, sure. Like we were just saying, like, were there temporary structures up that could provide cover for somebody that was going to do something like this? So hopefully they were able to either get there before those structures were taken down and removed, or they have photographs of all these structures, maybe aerial photographs, drone footage, things like that maybe the production people were taking that you can then get copies of. Because those temporary structures could kind of give you a lot of information about the person's movements or the perpetrator's movements or where this happened and how it happened. If there were temporary structures around, those could potentially provide, a good venue for beating someone to death without anybody looking. But once those structures are gone, you can't kind of fathom those things anymore. So it's very important that they kind of, again, this can also be done. You can reconstruct a scene like this through videos if people are taking videos and posting them online, or people can send copies of those videos or upload them. The FBI usually has a website that you can upload video to for examination. And so if people are doing that, they can kind of maybe reconstruct some of these things through video and photographs. But it's
And
very important to have that information.
without a doubt, and because I think of the places that his friend who has been posting online when he was missing about, hey, this is where I saw him the night that we lost eyes on him. And I think too, like to your point, that the tickets for this, it's not like a sporting event. Maybe if I buy, and I'm putting in my credit card number and it's my name and all of this, you buy, but it can still be somewhat anonymous to go to Burning Man. If someone say is in your RV that you're going out with, how do you track down who might have been around him that night? Even if you have video of, say, here's some people in a costume partying with them, how do you figure out who that person is?
Yeah, that's a good point. And to your example, if you have, on your phone, your ticket, I know a lot of these places because I've been to some concerts recently, and it's all by video, it's all by phone, it's all on an app, and you can't even have a paper ticket. But the good thing about that is not only does it tell you who the person is, a lot of times in other venues, it tells you the seat number, the row, or the section they're in, and we can find out who is sitting around you. You don't have that here in this kind of event, and it becomes very, very difficult. Again, you have to reach out and get the public's assistance. You have to say, hey, we see him in three different places with this person with a particular mask on. And here's the mask. Does anyone know who this is wearing this mask? So not necessarily asking about the victim or even the perpetrator. You're asking about a certain person who might be a witness. And so if they do have those unique kind of costumes on or things that they're wearing, you need the public's help in identifying who they are. Now, there are probably, like you said earlier, thousands of hours of video uploaded to different social media platforms. And do the authorities have the resources to run all that stuff, say to an AI program and say, show me everybody that was within, a certain distance from this particular person on any video, and then you can start working, with that. But in the end, you certainly need the public's assistance, people who attended, to even if they don't realize that they were involved or they were close to the person, they have to review their video. They have to say, "Oh, I was standing right behind this guy. I didn't even realize it." So you really need to appeal to the public's assistance in this case.
And just looking through like pictures of Burning Man today and kind of putting this story together, I mean, like the costumes. I mean, if you're law enforcement and it's like, even if you find someone that you want to talk to and they're wearing like a bear mask, it's like, how do I even go and figure out who that person is? I mean, it's incredibly complicated. The resources part of it too, I think is interesting because the Pershing County Sheriff's Office in Nevada, very rural place. I mean, they have to cover a lot of land on a day-to-day basis, but Burning Man's probably the biggest thing that happens there every single year. He's originally from Russia. He lived out of state in Washington. There's probably people you want to talk to in different states because people travel from all over to go to Burning Man. How do you get the resources together for this case, especially if you're in a smaller sheriff's office where all this happened?
I was involved in many cases like that, especially when I was running the dive team with more smaller rural jurisdictions that couldn't even afford to have a dive team. They called the local FBI office and asked for assistance. And the FBI has a budget every year called Domestic Police Cooperation. We also have Foreign Police Cooperation. DPC, Domestic Police Cooperation matters, are run under a certain file number. We don't ask the asking jurisdiction for funds, and we don't have mutual aid kind of calls. We just come and we provide our assistance. And I did that a number of times with the dive team. And so they can probably reach out for their local FBI office and see if the FBI can't lend them some resources to do this. Certainly, the FBI has offices all over the country and all over the world, and in Russia and in Tacoma, Washington, what we're talking about. We have offices and agents there all the time. And so they certainly could seek that kind of assistance, or Homeland Security or another federal agency. The federal agencies do have resources that are geared and specifically earmarked for assisting local law enforcement.
When it comes to figuring out the profile of a victim and whether this was a random attack, I mean, we don't know much about him other than he was from Russia originally and then had been in the United States, it seems, for a period of time, was an artist. A lot of people seem to like him. And on one hand, I think of Burning Man, a lot of people go and do drugs there. On the other hand, who knows what was going on in his personal life and who was out there with him. If you're the detective or the agent that's trying to piece together who might be involved here, how do you go about kind of putting that profile together of this victim and who they were connected to?
Well, you do a deep dive into his life. You basically have to kind of assume his identity and say, who was he, where he was in his life and his business and his art. Did he have any enemies? Did he have any people that didn't like him, through personal relationships, through financial relationships, and through business relationships like his art. And then you try to figure out if this was, a targeted attack. Because it could be somebody followed him to Burning Man. If you want to do harm to someone, although it seems like, oh, there's so many people around, but there's a lot of people around that kind of provides you, the perpetrator, with anonymity. So, you have to do that. Or was this a random event that took place at Burning Man? Did he piss somebody off there? Did he bump into the wrong person and not apologize? There's 1,000 different possibilities that you have to kind of look into. But the first part is, was this somebody they knew beforehand, before they even went to this event? And for that, you need to kind of go into his life, go into his social activities, go into his business activities, and see if someone had either a beef with him, had a financial interest in his death, or something like that. And that's a whole nother part of the investigation, other than what we've been talking about to this point, is, the physical location of and working that kind of thing. So you're working those witnesses, you're working those videos, and then somebody else, another part of your team, hopefully, is kind of doing a deep dive into his life. Did he have any enemies? Did he have any current disagreements or fights with people? And so there's a lot of different things that have to happen, simultaneously.
How long? Because I know, and it might be more of a TV show thing when people say the first 48 when it comes to solving a murder. And, there's a big difference, as you know, as well as anybody, from what we see on TV and then what it actually takes to solve some of these crimes. But from what you're talking about, piecing together his profile, to tracking down everybody that he was with, to reaching out to people in different states. I mean, how many hours are we talking about? Like the type of manpower that this investigation would take to actually start to get somewhere if something doesn't just kind of break on its own in front of you.
Yeah, it could take a long time, and because it's so spread out, because you have to find out who your witnesses are first. I mean, and that could take a while for the reasons we described earlier, and then you have to send people to those locations. You have to find them. For identifying them is only the first step, and that's going to be difficult in itself. Then finding them is the second step. That could be difficult, and then getting them to cooperate might be a third step that's difficult. So you have to go through this process, and it takes time. You can imagine how much it's going to take to go through the videos and come up with a list of people that you want to talk to, and then find out where in the world those people are, because this is an international event. And so you may have to do significant travel to get to these people, and then the people have to be willing to talk to you. And those are basically the three steps, but each one of those steps, could take, a great amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, an incredibly challenging case. I mean, between it being in the desert, a place that's not even there anymore, no cell phone service, costumes, the whole bit. I mean, law enforcement seems like they really have their work cut out for them in this case. Retired FBI agent and attorney Bobby Chacon. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.